Good evening and welcome to another World Building Workshop. Tonight we are going to be discussing everything that's going to go into the follow-up. Last week we built our foundation, and in this episode it's time to discuss everything that goes on after that. It looks like Instagram's having some connection issues. I think YouTube was complaining at me that my internet was slow tonight. Twitch, you look like you're doing pretty good. So thank you everybody for being here. I hope that we have a decent enough, what on earth? A decent enough stream this evening, but we'll go ahead and get started either way. All right, so as we can see here in my notes, this is last week's episode, episode 2, where we were talking about the foundation, right? This is the foundation of our world, the things that we need to build on to. This is going to give us kind of the background that we're looking for. And now, this week, we're going to be discussing the structure, the stuff that gets put on top of last week's foundation. For instance, you can see things as simple as what it's called, right? But when it was founded, the sort of terrain that we're dealing with, and the reason it was founded, the sort of settlement, all of these basic things that are going to go into our concept. And now it is time to see if Instagram will hop in with us. But I've got my notes prepared, and we're ready to rock. This is going to be kind of the general structure that we're going to be discussing this evening. The things that we're going to be talking about, the history, the natural events, traditions in this locale. All of these things are put together. They come together to create the world that we're looking for. And it looks like Instagram just doesn't want to go live tonight. So sorry, Instagram, you missed an episode. Bummer. All right, YouTube and Twitch, I'm glad that you're here. So, of course, as always, please remember, like, follow, subscribe, all the things, anything to help this channel grow. That way other people can learn this, I don't want to say essential, because I ended up, I started without this, but hopefully we'll be able to help you start with more than I did, and hopefully that helps you in the future. So, like, follow, subscribe, share with your friends, all the things. So we're talking about, let's flip back over so that we can refresh everybody where we're at here, right? This is information. I'm world building for an upcoming campaign, starting a new 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons campaign. And this is the Rising Tide. Ooh. And the general concept, the uniqueness there is that the tide in this area continues to rise, but it never recedes. And so what is the magical drama? What is causing this? What's happening that's making this do what it's doing? And so we're building the background here into what is making that happen. But the main city that we're dealing with here is Mooncrest. Mooncrest was established about 500 years ago and is in an island chain kind of known as the Breaks. And it is a kind of regional capital governed by a council of dons. So there's some minor nobility situations going on here. And all of this is coming together so that we can establish historical events that led up to this, right? And whenever you are making your homebrew campaign, your homebrew world, these are all nice to haves. These are all things that help your world feel full, right? Because at the end of the day, as long as you've got your foundation, you can build as you go, right? That's totally acceptable, totally cool. Because what that means is your players are helping you map out and flesh out your world. Essentially, build the landscape, the floor plan, if you will. Every house has a floor plan, and we put different things in different corners, and so on and so forth. And your players help you flesh that out. What this is just kind of the general structure to help you do that, right? Establishing historical events, you don't need an encyclopedia of all of the things that have happened in Mooncrest. Let's go ahead and write that up there. We don't need an encyclopedia entry on Mooncrest and its history over the last 500 years at all. You could have nothing more than it was established, this is the reason it was established, and go from there. And the story that you make together with your players is probably going to be cooler than anything that you could personally write by yourself. Now, I don't want to generalize everybody into that, little corner there, but think of it like this. You could make a story by yourself, and it could be good. You could make a story with yourself and the 5 or 6 other people at the table, and it could be incredible because there's 5 or 6 other minds able to think, ooh, wouldn't that be cool? Or, ooh, hey, what about this? And ooh, that's a really cool idea. And use their backstories to help you fill this out. So these are all nice to haves, but not necessary. But we're going to fill them out anyways because we got the time, so we're going to do it. Historical events. Now, the town was established over the last 500 years. The real question here is, because of the concept, right, we need to establish... Brad on YouTube says, founding event and maybe a key event that still influences living memory. Right. That's the kicker. It's all well and good that, some event happened 5 years ago. Sorry, not to put it down, but I don't know anybody, and nobody that I know, I think, knows anybody who participated in World War II. So while that is a historical event, and while the things that happened there and the reasons that they happened should never be forgotten, at the end of the day, what does that mean for your protagonists, your players at the table? Is this just a thing, an entry in a history book? Or what's actually pertinent? What would be a pertinent event for, the happening in history that matters? And so the thing that comes to my mind is probably the first day that the tide never went back out, right? And so we need a name for the day the tide didn't recede, right? What would we call the tide coming in one day and we're like, hey, it's afternoon. Like, why didn't the tide go back out? And wondering about that. So things I know on YouTube. Created a city with my players following my pattern. Ooh, thanks. Making me feel all special. They had a lot of ideas for fun settings, but a difficult time fleshing out the history or justification for why things are the way they are. And that's exactly what this episode is about. This helps us provide some of that justification. It's all well and good that this is the way it is. This is kind of more along the lines of why it is the way it is. So, hopefully... Ooh, the encroaching. I like it. We're using it. Done. Canon. The encroaching. Right? Ooh, is it just encroaches? The encroaching. The great encroaching. And that marks the day that the tide came in and never receded. And that's the moment that people were just like, okay, like, something's happening. And now, kind of tying into natural events here, because that's a historical natural event, right? So what is how frequently did this happen, this encroaching? The slow flood. Ooh. Triple Dub says, things I know is always on fire. The slow flood. So that could be the slow flood. It's a little too much in the mouth, I think. The slow flood. The flooding. We'll brainstorm that. Keep brainstorming that in the chat. We'll think about that. But the natural event here is, let's say that every new moon or something like that, right? It continued to encroach, right? And it was just... Is it escalating in distance or escalating in speed? I think it needs to escalate in frequency and not necessarily in distance. So let's say that the tide, only ever raises maybe a foot, but every new moon it raises another foot. And it's going to provide us a really interesting timer for our players. So let's do something like every new moon now. That encroaching continues to encroach every new moon. And that, because that has begun over the last, I don't know, year maybe, how much, raising a 12 feet in a year, that could be an absolutely huge deal. Think about the amount of flooding that has happened in the United States with hurricanes and things like that. It only raised a couple of feet, with the storm, but that just a couple of feet makes a huge difference. Or the difference in maybe like a floodplain near a river. What does 3 feet on a river mean for people in kind of a floodplain? That could be a huge deal. The rising. Ooh, there it is. Very succinct. The rising is another good. The rising. So yeah. So the encroachment, the rise. Ooh. So maybe the rise is the name for the event as it continues to encroach every new moon, and they just refer to it as the rising, right? Yeah, oh, that's an interesting point. Not something you think about. Florida would be gone if the ocean rose 12 feet, right? Places that are, so thankfully we're dealing with islandscape here, so we're dealing with, a generally, there's at least an initial vertical by nature of being an island, so that could be a little too much. Something to think about there, how we're going to handle that. What the actual quantifying numbers here are. So we need to actually quantify what would be a reasonable amount or frequency for this to happen in probably, let's say, the last year, right? And over the last year that this has been happening, and what does that mean for us? All right. And because this has been happening, what traditions or taboo things, this is definitely an item that makes your world feel full. Triple dub times 3 would have a group of druids who've been able to keep the rising tide at bay. Ooh, okay, I like the sound of that. Let's maybe, so you can't see it, but down at the bottom we've got religion. And if there was anybody that could, for any reason, say, preserve your coastal town that's under threat of being flooded, they would instantly have huge amounts of political sway, of cultural sway with the people, sort of thing. So I think a druidic, a bunch of coastal druids, a circle of coastal druids get together and be able to keep the flood at bay could have a really interesting religious connotation in the area, or a cleric or something like that, who, oh yeah, I bestowed a blessing on this one little village, and the tide goes in normal over there, so I don't know what your problem is. Something like that could be an interesting dynamic where people would be investigating, okay, who's the god that did this, like who's under whose blessing. They discover there's like an actual a pact was made, some sacrifices. The story writes itself. There could be an interesting moral twist down there. Things I know. I knew a guy from Fiji who said he could actually paddle over neighboring islands. Wow. Paddle over neighboring islands that were now submerged from the rising waters or sinking from volcanic activity. That is crazy. Interesting how much the world could change in a heartbeat. Boats have been designed for shallow waters to shuttle people to the actual ships, right? Because it's rised up the coast. So there's, how far can you get these deep galley? What's the word? These deep belly ships. how close can you get them to the island anymore, because now they have to not only, deal with the reefs, which may be deeper now, and so maybe they could actually get in closer. I don't know. There's an interesting dynamic there. So, all right, traditions. So traditions, taboos, things like that, these are a really great way to make your world feel real. When you've got a saying, right? It's fun having Brad in here because he's actually in one of my campaigns, and in the Shifting Sands campaign, and he whipped out. So in the Shifting Sands campaign, there is a kind of a curse on the land where unless you have water in an enchanted vessel, it will instantly evaporate. Like, you can't spit on the sand, it will evaporate before it gets to the ground. And so one of the blessings of this paladin, this cleric, is what is it? It's cool breezes, sweet waters and cool breezes, right? And just kind of that fun little quirky sweet waters and cool breezes. Just a cool little local saying, right? It's kind of a shalom sort of saying there, right? Very cultural, could have roots in religion sort of thing, like his did because of the water, but still just a very cultural vibe, very cultural feel that lets the world feel like, oh, these are like an actual people, because they're not cookie cutter NPCs. When you're greeted by the shopkeeper and he has, oh, sweet waters and cool breezes, and or sweet waters and cool breezes as your return sort of thing, that makes your world feel real. And as the players at your table start reading into that, and they're like, oh, this is a thing, and then they start doing it, and it's really cool to watch, really cool to see. Keep your shirt dry. Ooh, yeah, keep your skirt dry. So, yeah, don't let keep your skirt dry, or don't let your shoes float away, sort of thing. From it hails from maybe the first rising, the encroachment, where, because people leave their shoes at the door, and the first time the tide didn't go back out, or the first time the tide rose, and people's shoes floated away, and so you've got a bunch of barefoot people. That could be a fun one. Keep your skirt dry. I like that. And don't let your shoes float away. Could be a very like mind your P's and Q's sort of thing. Make sure all your stuff's taken care of. That would be fun. Don't let your shoes float away. Awesome. All right. Any other? So let's find a taboo. We need a taboo for these people. Maybe what is something that if a player were to do it, they would look at you aghast. Like, how could you say such a thing? So there are some interesting taboos. The easiest thing to do is source your taboos for your world from the real world, from like our planet. An interesting one that I actually don't know why it's taboo, but in certain European countries, you should not shake hands across the threshold. Like, and I've watched people put their foot to the threshold to shake my hand before, to make sure that we weren't shaking across the threshold. And so that was a really interesting, like, oh, like, why do you do that? And I never had the guts to ask the guy, like, hey, like, what's with your weird social custom, like that. But we all have our taboos. It's the superstitions. That's a great one. A great way. Yeah, what's a superstition? Where you spill the salt, so you throw it over your shoulder, sort of thing. So things like that. I feel so these are very like a pirate. There's a lot of pirates, a lot of merchants. So something along the lines of like horrible luck if your knot ever comes untied, sort of thing. Like, Or if you do something, your knots will always come untied. I'll do that later. The tide might catch you today. Ooh, I like that. Saying I'll do that later. The tide might catch you today. That's a good one. Time and tide, wait for no man. Yeah, that's a good. I like that. Very good, you guys. All right, we'll think about it. We'll think about it. So, what the taboos and the superstitions can lead us into are legends and myths. And when we're thinking about legends and myths, it's like, oh, okay, like that's broad. That's very wide scope. And so I like to start initially with, you can't see it because my writing is wrapping into things here, but an item, a place, a person, and a monster or a creature, something like that, right? So there's always some legend or myth about a thing, right? A place nearby, a person, and a creature. So for instance, I am from Arizona, and so we have the Mogollon monster is a piece of supernatural local lore that lives up on the Mogollon Rim in the forest up north in northern Arizona. And that is just a small little bit of local lore, legend, and myth, right? And you can have a place like the Lost Dutchman's Mine, and how somewhere out in the Arizona desert there's a deep, especially valuable mine that was lost because of the greed of the Dutchman who, didn't tell anybody else about it. A person, the Lost Dutchman. All right, we're getting into more lore there, but that could also be someone like Redbeard or Blackbeard, someone who over time became a larger than life individual, and now there's myths and legends told about them. Or items like Excalibur. That's a great item that has so much lore and myth wrapped around it, when it was probably just like a slightly more than mediocre sword. But because of the things that it was involved in, it became so much more, right? And that's what we can think about when we're making items or places or people or monsters for the lore here. So there should, of course, be a place, right, that someone buried a treasure, right? There's some pirate at some point who, on one of the islands in the breaks, buried a secret treasure. That could be a fun little side quest. One of these games. We'll do a little one-shot treasure hunt. Could be fun. A person. This is an interesting one because we're dealing with fantasy, right? We're dealing with more than just like, oh yeah, some King Arthur and Excalibur, right? We could do so much more. So we can think of like truly powerful beings that are capable of, right? A wizard or a druid. So I kind of like the druids that we mentioned, right? Druids are fun for me, especially when they are water related, because we don't actually think about druids as plot devices. I don't know. I don't generally think about druids as plot devices very much, when they're really such a great, like, just drop it in. Because how typical is it for, oh yeah, some hermit druid doing something, has some hidden knowledge, right? It's a great tool to use, and so there's no reason to not have some sea druid who literally lives out Waterworld style out on the ocean. Like, he hasn't stepped on land in who knows how long, and he has been the harbinger of the rising for years and years, decades even. And so people always wrote this guy off, and then all of a sudden his prophecies are coming true, and now he's a man of myth and legend. Things I Know has another one. Never sail under an angel moon. That's what they call it in Ghana, When the moon has a halo, ooh, it generally is a predictor of rain. Maybe in this region it could herald a storm. That's a really good one because that is real life. That's a real life superstition. A real life, don't sail under the halo moon or the angel moon. And that is actually a real world predictor. You know, over here in the Boy Scouts, that's what I was always taught. Like, oh yeah, you can, you know, if there are whatever stars inside the halo around the moon or something like that, like there's a whole thingy about it. I don't know. Don't sail under the angel moon. That's a good phrase. Very good little superstition. I like it. Something like that. Right. It's just a little piece of lore that I actually don't know. So what do you do? There it is. Let's see. Oh, so a myth about this person. So we could establish this person as being special because of prophecies, right? Some druid that has been dropping prophecy for the last 10 years, and now all of a sudden, like, he's, oh yeah, some ancient druid that lives out on the sea. Good luck finding him because he just sails around all the time. You know, just a literal sea nomad. But that could be an interesting way to ramp up kind of this cult around this sea druid. Could be fun. Prophecy about the rising. Excellent. And of course, items and monsters. All right, monsters. This is so great because we have the entire ocean beneath us, right? What happens as the tide is rising and suddenly these deep sea creatures are able to get right up to the island where they weren't before because of that rising tide. And so now it doesn't matter that your deep-bellied, you know, your big galleons are able to get all the way up to wherever, because so are the monsters now. So are these deep sea monsters, and they're coming right up to the island for whatever reason. And so they might be pestering or causing problems for some of these floating cities that have begun to establish as people are finding ways to survive however they can. So that could create really cool problems, legends and myths, as some legendary monster has been sighted just off the breaks. And like, think of the stir, think of the plot hook that could create, as suddenly the entire town, all of Mooncrest, is in an absolute uproar, a tizzy, because some legendary beast was seen just off the coast. Right? That would be so cool. That would be a great moment for your players. Old Shellface. He's always pouting saltwater. Yeah, the D&D Noah. I like it. Yep. Excellent. So we've got some legends and myths established. Now it's time to get into the nitty-gritty, right? And this is more of kind of the foundation that we established last week. Because last week we talked a little bit about guilds and orders and councils and things like that. And this is just bringing to mind, you can be as specific as you would like, okay? And keeping into mind the whole, village, town, city, capital, of 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and then 5 plus, right? And since we're dealing with kind of a regional capital, it's just good preparation to have 3 or 4 of all of these things prepared, because that will help you establish that depth. When your players say, oh, I would like to go to the inn, and you say, well, you could go to this inn, or this inn, or this inn, or this inn. And they say, oh, options. Well, I would only like to spend 2 silver a night. Okay, then you can go to this inn or this inn, right? And that helps just help your players feel like, man, this world is so full. We've got more comments. You are now in the splash zone. So the merchant, it's always good to have an items, right? We need a mundane items. We need a magic items. Okay, magic items and a mundane items. So a smith and some wizard, right? And then we need what other shops do you guys like to have? What merchants do you like to have on hand? Any good merchants? Guilds. We already talked about kind of the shipwrights. There's of course going to be a merchants guild. There would be a rope makers guild. What's a rope maker called? Can anyone recall? Things I know. What is a rope maker called? A rope? Man, there's a specific word for it, and I feel like it's kicking around back here. Gosh dang it, a rope maker. That would be a huge industry. Ooh, the map makers guild. Very good, Triple. Yeah, the map makers. Map makers guild. Yeah, that's a good. So that would probably maybe into like a scribe. Yeah, something like that. Some sort of scribes guild sort of vibe. Or it might be like pure adventurers where they're just a bunch of like prospector sort of gold hunter kind of guys. We're like, we're gonna go find the next island sort of thing. Like, I don't know, who knows? You could make them however you want to make them. Is it ropers, Triple? The roper. Man, I feel like there's a specific, because like, you know, you've got like a boyer sort of thing. A roper. Well, there you go. The Ropers Guild. Cool. I mean, I'm cool with it, but I couldn't. I could have sworn there was a specific term for, like the industry where they're twisting ropes in the big long buildings of. Yeah. Oh well. The ropers. There's definitely going to be a huge rope making industry, considering all of the ships. And this guilds doesn't necessarily have to be like official guilds either. We can think about criminal guilds here too, kind of the underworld vibe, and that largely is going to be the gangs. We talked about this a little bit last episode, where the gangs are going to play a large role, but at the end of the day, that's largely going to be crews. You know, oh, what crew do you belong to, and you know, are you a part of the right merchant company? You know, oh yeah, you're East India. Okay, we're going toe to toe with you. Screw you guys, sort of thing. Just that sort of vibe. The Yap Islands is grouped in Micronesia and has a very peculiar currency stone. Stone money known as rye are large stone discs, sometimes measuring up to 4 meters. A very peculiar. That is peculiar. And while I could understand. So, economy is tough, right? Because you could, as much as we might want to muck around with like making our own economy for the world, when all of 5th edition messes around, just uses gold. I don't even use silver or copper at my tables, right? Platinum is rarely used. Once upon a time, I mucked around with all the different currencies. And because it's probably because of the type of game that I run, that I don't necessarily put that much effort into economy. And so, because I don't track encumbrance, because I don't track ammunition, because I don't track spell components, right? I just consider that, oh yeah, that's the basic. You've managed that. That's part of being an adventurer. And because I don't manage that, or I don't care to manage that, I think largely I don't care to manage the smaller currencies either, or make my own economy. And so really it's just a matter of managing, okay, how much does a potion actually cost here? They needed a new item, they went to a blacksmith. All right, how much does this actually cost? And so I will largely maintain the Dungeon Master's Guide, the Player's Handbook costs for items, simply out of ease. But there are ways to introduce economy that aren't strictly gold, right? If you're bored with gold and gold's just not working for you, a way that you can make your world feel full and medieval sort of thing is payment in kind. Hey, I'll give you this for that. Like that's totally normal. That's a totally human thing to do, right? You go to any cafeteria anywhere and you'll see kids, hey, here's my fruit snacks for your bag of Doritos. Like humans have been doing that forever, right? I've got something you want, you've got something I want, let's barter. That's totally normal. Let your players do that. Oh, well, you know, it's nice that you want this battle axe, but, you know, I see that you've got 4 weapons. Look at your character sheet. 4 weapons. Maybe, you know, I'll take 2 of your swords if you want this battle axe. And I guarantee you, your players will be like, oh yeah, sure. Because they weren't even thinking about it. They've just, over time, accumulated this stuff. Have them cash it in. Barter for it. It's a totally normal thing to do. Triple. Or you could use that rock system like a placeholder for gold. Maybe you can go to a super secure bank type deal to exchange for rocks for gold. So further prevent violence and looking in the main city. Yeah, so in this last stream, we talked about how the city itself, there's like no violence permitted. There's a 0 tolerance policy on violence. And so that could be an interesting way to kind of work around, oh yeah, well, there's nothing to steal. You essentially just have these casino chips, right? But at the end of the day, if those casino chips have value with the casino, then they have value, right? So it's tough. It's tough because you're essentially just transitioning the value to something else. We do it with paper dollars, right? Like, oh yeah, this has a value because we say it does, right? This rock has a value because we say it does. It's the same thing. Yeah, it's complicated. Yep. Sailmaker would be a common craft. Yeah, they tend to pick up gossip because they always visit the many vessels. Ooh, that would be a great... So you go to the Sailmaker Guild for information, right? And that could be a cool... kind of like a spy. There could be like a subtle spy guild underneath there. The Sailmakers. And they have kind of an information ring. And oh yeah, if you need information, go talk to so-and-so at the Sailmakers. They know what you're doing. The Fishmongers, managing the sea industry. That's another good one. I like that. The Mongers, the Fishmongers. Very good. Some good guilds. Good things to keep in mind. Inns are straightforward, and I actually really enjoy making inns with my players. So even if I have 3 or 4 inns built, right? I'll always put that forward. Oh yeah, you can go to you can go to the Broken Branch Inn. Okay, that's great. I don't know how many dungeon masters are like this, but I love to get my players involved in making the world. If a player says, oh, I would like to go to this place, I would like to go to the local inn, or I would like to go talk to the local cleric of so-and-so, I say, oh, excellent, that's a great idea. You arrive. What is the name of the inn? And they look at me and they go, well, the Silly Serpent. Excellent. That's a great name for an inn. and then I'll go to the next player. Hey, the barkeep is sitting behind the bar polishing a glass. What's something unique that you notice about them? I absolutely love building the scene with my players and getting them to incorporate their ideas. And the reason I think that I like doing that is because, one, it involves my players, right? They're not sitting there on their phone like, oh yeah, I'm doing whatever. I can say, hey, what is something that you notice about the inn? What's a cool feature in this inn? Oh, well, there's it's built in an old fortress dungeon, or I don't know, and there's still chains on the walls. Okay, cool little feature, I guess. Why not? And so that provides the opportunity for my players to role play a little bit, help build the world with me, and inevitably the word that I would call it is invest. They are putting into the world. They are taking their idea and putting that value into the world, and it's a huge difference. It makes a huge difference in how your players treat your world, because it's like any project, any toy, anything ever. It just doesn't quite have the same value if someone else took care of it. But if you built it, if you made that car from the ground up, if you made that thing in wood shop, suddenly it has an intrinsic value to you. The value is greater because you invested your time and your effort into it. It's the same thing at the table. If we're the only people investing in the world, then that's how we get a bunch of murder hobos. That's not to say your players aren't going to murder hobo anyways. But if your players are just derping around your world, murder hoboing everybody, it's because they have no actual investment in your world. It's cheap for them. They look at it like playing a video game. I can do whatever I would like without consequence. But the moment that they help describe an NPC, and that NPC has a cool accent, and then suddenly that NPC is a part of 5 or 6 sessions, are they going to kill that NPC? No, they're not, because they invested in that NPC, right? It's the same thing with your world. It's the same thing with your inn. It's the same thing with your guilds. Use your players to help you, because it's just like at the very beginning. One mind, good. 5, 6, 7 minds together, great. There it is. All right. We've got some talk in the chat. Both are great ideas. The farmers are upset for good reason. Their crops are literally shrinking, right? Right as their crops are drowning, floating away. Yeah, the fields are shrinking. Yeah, interesting stuff going on there. Ooh. Once again, that is part of the unique concept here that I'm trying to generate, is what is this going to do culturally? What effect is this rising tide going to have on the world? And then, of course, we have religions. We've got all of the water religions. You probably have some weird people that are like praying to giant crabs or something like that, like Titanic-sized crabs from out in the depths or something like that. There's some crab goddess, who knows? But you can. The world is endless. People have worshipped anything and everything for just about every other reason. So whatever religion you need in your world, that is the religion that I say you should build in your world. You can always, when you're making religions, if you have an interest in making a pantheon, so making gods, go check out my link tree. I have a video somewhere in the depths of Instagram, but if you go to my link tree, it'll take you straight to it, on how to make a pantheon. And maybe in the next couple months here, I'll make another video. I'll remake that video here for YouTube and Twitch on how to make a pantheon and where you should start. But always, it's super easy. Start with the big 6, right? The big 6. Fire, water, earth, air, life, and death. Boom. All right, big 6 covered. Then you start branching out into concepts like war and peace. Always think in contradictions, light and dark. Things like that make it super easy to make gods, to make religions about those gods. And of course, people throughout history have been doing horrible things for horrible reasons, which is really good when making morally gray villains. I love using religion because, oh yeah, for the greater good, as you Thanos snap people into oblivion. Like, wait a second, like, was that for the greater good, or was that just like the easiest solution? Right? There's any number of things. Killmonger's a great example of a gray villain. Like, oh well, he says a lot of good things, and then like he just murders. Like, oh, maybe he's not a good guy, right? That concept, right? Religions are great at that. Religions are a great asset when coming up with plot hooks and conflict and problems for your players that, ooh, well, no, that actually, that sounded good at first, but that was not a very good reason. So, oh, Brad, the Glass Bottom Inn, ooh, I like that, is a new floating inn that features the glass floor. It allows you to look into the reef below, not just the reef, but old homes perhaps, right? The Glass Bottom Inn, maybe it was built as someone built on top of like their old inn, and so they were just like entrepreneurial about it, and they're like, well, this is rising, and so they just built higher on their inn. That could be an interesting as they're anchored to their old inn. I like it. The Glass Bottom Inn, that's a fun one. The first of many floating buildings that are moored just offshore. How long till someone suggests sacrificing a virgin to the sea? Not long. Not long at all. The moment you mention some legendary sea monster that some druid prophesied about is the moment your players are like, welp, time to yeet the wizard into the sea because we need a virgin, so first come, first serve. How long? That happens every Tuesday. Right? Every Tuesday we just throw some new virgin into the sea in an attempt to get it to recede. Well, folks, that's all I have for building our world for this week. Next week, we're actually going to make a 5-step encounter. I'm going to show you the 5-step encounter. It is an excellent system, super easy to use, super fast. You can do it on the fly or prepare ahead of time to help you create fun moments, fun dungeons, fun encounters for your players. And so we'll make one in, on, around Mooncrest here in the Rising Sea. So if I have no further questions, right, that was fast. No further questions, we'll go ahead and sign off for the evening. Of course, everybody, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you spending time with me. Watch my other stuff, like, follow, subscribe, all the things. But as always, and most importantly, have fun and take care of your players. All right, you guys, thanks for hanging around. I appreciate it. It was a good productive session today. We got some fun stuff thought about. Triple Dub, could you perhaps post these on your YouTube channel? Yeah, it's post old videos or post this video, because this is on YouTube. This is currently streaming live on YouTube. It will pop back up. There's plenty of playlists, plenty of other videos. So yeah, go check out the YouTube. That is where these all get stashed. Of course, I forgot to... Oh, all the past streams. So the problem is Instagram does not play well with others. And so I'm sure that there's some program out there, some software that I could use to harvest my old Instagram live streams, but I haven't seen or found it yet. But a lot of those. So I did almost a year of weekly world building workshops just on Instagram Live, and so it's only been in the last, I guess, 6-ish months or so that I've been posting to YouTube, and just this year, so just this last month, that I've been posting anything on Twitch. So, yep. All right, you guys. Thanks for hanging around. We will